Tim, how you doing today?
Doing great, John, and yourself?
Good. Thanks for stepping in. Our colleague Elliot's out this week, but more importantly, we thought, just given the issue of the week being sanctions, to bring you back on to chat about this. So, wanted to ask you. Obviously, a lot of sanctions have been issued during the past number of years, and it's a big topic. But I thought the one this week warranted a couple of minutes of our time. And so this was a Treasury sanction on Bulgarian individuals and focusing on corruption. So give us a sense of the rationale. And let me just preface it by saying, the issue of corruption we realize is really important to our financial crime community. And we're going to be doing a corruption related webinar later this month because we wanted to focus on some of those issues. But talk a bit about how the administration issued this particular sanction.
Yeah, John, this is a significant action by the U.S. Treasury. In fact, Andrea Gacki, the director at OFAC, made note in her press release that this is the largest single sanction program going in play, utilizing the Global Magnitzsky Human Rights Sanctions Program to counter corruption, in that there were the largest number of entities issued on a single day, if you will. The country being focused on here is Bulgaria. And there's a couple of things that I think are quite interesting in this action. First of all, there is, again, a showing of convergence with State Department in that there's a reference within the press release that talks about Section 219 of the Immigration and Naturalization Act.
Right.
And I think that's noteworthy that we're seeing more and more between Commerce, State, and Treasury. And I think that trend will continue. But, at a simple level, the Treasury identified three individuals: a Vasil Kormov Bajkov, Delan Savchensvik Pivsky, and an Ilko Dimitrov Zelaznovkov. Obviously, I did not come from Bulgaria.
Good try anyway, though.
Exactly. Fundamentally, what they're focusing on here: bribery and corruption of governmental officials. And this is just the three individuals, but all said and done, there are 64 separate entities, businesses that are owned or controlled by these individuals. And just to kind of, start off, businessmen and oligarchs predominantly is what we're talking about here. Bajkov was basically the chairman of the Gambling Commission in Bulgaria. And the major accusation, not accusation, what the
finding,
the illegalities that he has committed was he was bribing the government to turn down all of his competitors' applications for licensing for gambling facilities. So he basically had a monopoly. To kind of put it in perspective, he was indicted, he was convicted, he fled. He is in the UAE right now. And they're still trying to prosecute him. So big list of gambling entities that are sanctioned here. And noteworthy is a professional basketball team.
Right.
That there are several Americans that are, in fact, players for that team. So they're kind of in for a surprise there. The next individual, Pivsky, was a former member of parliament and basically controls a lot of the media in Bulgaria, and was fundamentally getting kickbacks from politicians in order to make sure that the media didn't say anything negative about him. And that's a pretty simplistic description of it. The last one is very interesting in that the individual, Zelaznikov, fundamentally was selling citizenship of Bulgaria to immigrants. And those of you that aren't geography majors, Bulgaria sits right next to Turkey, where we got the Syrian refugee crisis and so forth. But what that individual is doing, besides selling citizenship, is he has been able to manipulate government entities that are embezzling and selling state assets for personal gain. So
Right.
some pretty nasty stuff there, John.
So let's add final question is the implications of these sanctions. There's two implications, right? There's practical, which you're going to cover in a second, in terms of the names of the entities, in terms of those of us that have to do filtering, but also just in general, what's an implication of a particular sanction? You've already said, obviously, with, for example, the people on the professional basketball teams, they're not going to get paid. But how are these sanctions utilized? And then what are some of the challenges to OFAC practitioners that you work with, throughout your career, in terms of looking at this list and making a decision on how to filter the list?
Yeah, so I think the big picture here is that there's going to be U.S. financial institutions, possibly brokerage firms, insurance companies, that may have accounts for many of these business entities. And there was no leak on this. This was a very swift action. So there's probably some pretty substantial assets being frozen right now of these businesses that are owned and controlled by these people, because those of us that have been in this world for some time know that when money is stolen, it is often moved to the United States because of security and the stability of our currency. So I think that's probably the big picture. Practical implications. I was looking through the entities here, and the one that jumped out to me the most is there is an Intrust Limited. There is a large Intrust bank in Wichita, Kansas. So you would have transactions and wires being originated to Intrust today that would be hitting filters right and left. There's another one named Real Estate Limited. I've got to think that's just popping everywhere. Bullet Trade. There were a number of Euro entity type names. Domino Games. Domino Pizza. There's just a lot of common words in here that are going to create some filtering havoc for people for quite some time.
Well, Tim, thanks so much for your insight. Reminding folks, on June the 24th at 1 o'clock Eastern, we will have a webinar on corruption related issues. So you're going to want to look for that. Also, you can subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts from. Tim White, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.